So welcome to my session, Beyond Debugging Systemic Enigmas and the Art of Thread Pulling. So this session is going to follow the story of me solving a particular major bug in one of our client systems. As the name of the session hopefully implies, the cause of the bug was not readily apparent, hence enigma. So we'll walk through each step of the way, step by step, pulling that thread, and hopefully along the way you gain some insights and into how to think through some of your own problems. So there will be a series of enigmas, each followed by their own corresponding thread pulling. And in that thread pulling, I'll hypothesize a few possible causes of the particular enigma, and then we'll evaluate that list and investigate which of those ideas is most likely to be the problem, and go on until we run into the next enigma. So I encourage you to focus and follow along as best you can to follow the kind of logical steps I'm taking along the way. But first, a little bit about me. My name is Eric. I work at Harmonic. I'm one of our directors. I've been developing in FileMaker for coming up on 7 years now. I've been at Harmonic for five of those. I'm a classically trained musician that then got into software, so those kind of work well together. Nowadays at Harmonic, I do a lot of project management and oversight and delegating and that kind of thing, but I do really enjoy the opportunities that I get to dig into code and pull threads every once in a while. So before we jump into the enigmas, I'll need to give you a little kind of setup, kind of what you need to know to understand the context that this problem is happening in. So the system, I'm going to drastically boil down and simplify the system for the sake of this conversation. It is a complex FileMaker and PHP and MySQL, etc. system that is been in continuous development for close to 10 years now by a number of developers concurrently, hundreds of thousands of lines of code. There's many millions of dollars of development time have been put into this system. So it's no small thing, but it supports a specific Medicaid program in the state of New York that, boiled down, real simply tracks expenditure against predefined budgets. Each user or participant in this program has their own budget, and that budget comes from the state as an Excel spreadsheet that gets parsed into our system. A human then reviews it for stuff, and then they kind of push it out into the rest of the system. The dollars or the expenditure are then summarized on a per participant, per budget line, per day level, because government regulation. And then for the end users, there is a budget summary that is available to them on the portal, on their portal that they can access, that lets them see how much they've spent against those budgets. Some key terms that will help our conversation: PAX, which is just our abbreviation for participant. So anywhere where you see the word PAX, that's an abbreviation for participant. We use it in field names, table occurrence names, scripts, all over the place. That's what that means. The SD parser, it is a FileMaker file that does the job of parsing the Excel document that contains budget. ISS PAXFY, that is a FileMaker file that aggregates information from each fiscal year, hence FY, for each participant. PAX, so PAXFY. Pretty clever. We have the PAXFY JSON, which is a JSON object within that file that summarizes information for a given fiscal year of a given participant. Next, we have PAX monthline, which is a table. It summarizes expenditure for a given participant, for a given month, for a given budget line. It's the name, PAX month line. And then lastly, we have budget line date. Hopefully you're finding a pattern here. This is also a table. This summarizes expenditure for a given participant, given budget line, given date. Okay, so that's set the stage. Hopefully all of that makes sense. For the first enigma, why are budget summaries suddenly blank? Here's what a budget summary normally looks like. You've got the budget lines that are kind of the rows of this table, and then the columns are the individual months of that fiscal year. And the kind of blue hyperlinked dollars, they can drill into those to see what expenses make up that sum of money. However, all of a sudden, this is what they look like. They're blank. There's just no dollars whatsoever. And that's a problem not only because people want to see their budget summaries, but there are other business rule operational type things that internal staff use in AP and bookkeeping and so forth that rely on the data in these budget summaries. So the fact that they're blank is a problem for everybody. So here's what we know. We know that they're blank. Got it. We also know that this was only affecting like 1% to 2% of participants. It wasn't everybody, just some. And we also know it didn't used to happen. This particular feature of the system has been humming along, working fine, like 5+ years without issue. And all of a sudden, it's just now breaking. So the first thread pulling. We did some real immediate triage work, and we asked the question, well, what drives the budget summary? I happen to know the answer to that, which is we transfer data from FileMaker to MySQL via the Paxify JSON. So the Paxify JSON is this JSON object, thousands of lines long, it summarizes everything, put that in MySQL, and MySQL explodes it out into the tables and columns and such that it needs to drive that budget summary. So then, what are the values in the JSON? Right, the Paxify is the source of truth. So what does the source of truth say? The month level data is actually missing. So that's interesting. So therefore, we know that the problem is not in the web code. It must be a data problem, whatever feeds that Paxify JSON. Okay, well, where does the month level data for each budget line come from? Like I said a few slides back, that comes from the Pax month line records. Okay, so what values are in those records? Well, they don't exist. Well, that's a problem. There were 0 Pax month line records for any of the affected participants. So something is deleting these records. And we're talking about tens of thousands of records that are being deleted.
How do you know they weren't created?
So the second enigma, what deletes Pax month line records? Well, that's easy. Nothing. There's nothing in our system that systemically deletes those records. There's no reason to delete them. And yet, being deleted. So, let's pull this thread. So, we got together and thought about, well, what are all the different ways you can delete records in FileMaker? Well, you've got the delete record button in the menu, or in the toolbar up top. You've got a keyboard shortcut, which relies on that menu item being there. You've got a delete record script step. Delete portal row. Truncate. Delete all records. Cascading deletes. You could delete through a data API call. Here's an interesting one. If you're using a plugin that allows you to do SQL statements against your data, it could be a SQL delete statement through that plugin. One of my colleagues proposed this last one, which I thought was interesting. Because with imports, you can override primary keys and foreign keys, things that you don't allow users to modify. Maybe the records weren't getting deleted. Maybe they were just being rekeyed on an import. Thought that was an interesting idea. So let's evaluate some of these options. The delete record button for the menu item. Extremely unlikely. That's disabled via a custom menu set that we have for users. And because of the sheer volume of records we're talking about, it's unlikely someone's sitting there going delete record 10,000 times. Same story with keyword shortcut, right? It relies on the menu item actually being in the menu and the sheer volume of records we're talking about. The delete record script step, that's a possibility, though it would likely need to be in a loop. That's something we might look for. Delete portal row. I mean, unlikely. It'd probably need to be in a loop. But we also would need a layout object, a portal, that is looking at a table occurrence of that table that is named that you could loop through. So, unlikely, but technically possible. Truncate. Impossible. Because not all the records in the table were deleted, just some of them. So immediately we could rule out it's not a truncate. Thank goodness. Next we've got delete all records. This is a possibility. We need the right found set, but that would do the trick for us. Cascading deletes. I was real hopeful on this one because it fits the pattern. It's very likely there's all these sibling records all get deleted. Kind of sounds like maybe a parent got deleted. That deleted all the siblings. A data API call in our system is unlikely. Historically, we haven't used the data API to do deletes. We've used it for reads and updates, but not deletes. So unlikely, but maybe someone wrote a rogue piece of code. In the SQL delete statement via a plugin, unlikely. We do have a plugin that's used some places in this system that allows you to perform SQL statements other than selects against our database tables, but we historically, again, have not used that plugin for deletes. So that would be rather rare. It's also going to be a little tricky to investigate. It's one of those things happening outside of the machine. Overwriting a data on import. This one I'm going to say is unlikely because we don't import into the PAX month line table. There are other tables in the system that we do import into, either to create them or to update them or whatever. PAX month line is not one of those. So wires would definitely have needed to have gotten crossed for stuff to be overwriting there. So let's investigate those front runners. So I say cascading deletes, delete record, and delete all records. Super hopeful. So I did some DDR work, and this system is going on 50 different FileMaker files. Its backups are 160, 170 gigs of data. That's not container data. That's just text. So I did a DDR search, and I found no cascading deletes anywhere against a table occurrence of PAX month line in any file. I was a little deflated at that point. I was hoping this was going to be real easy. Rolled that one out. Next, on delete record, I searched in the DDR for any delete record script step that was happening within the context of any table occurrence of PAX month line. And I found 0 of them. So then I did the same thing for delete all records, but for the delete all record script step that was happening in the context of a PAX month line table occurrence. I found exactly 4 scripts that met that criteria. There they are. Apparently we do delete records in this table sometimes. So here's the problem. The delete condition in each of those scripts should never have been met. So all of those delete records are all within a conditional statement. That conditional statement should never have been true. But maybe it was true somehow. So which of those 4 scripts was the problem, if any of them? Because we still don't know that it was actually a delete all records that was actually the culprit here. We're still just pulling a thread. So we added logging in each of those 4 scripts. And actually, Alex, who added the logging into this, is here today. So right before the delete records, you can see on line 28, we just called a subscript. It's creating a log record. And we're capturing things like the user, timestamp, what script's running, what the found count is, just some basic stuff like that, and then allowing the delete to happen. And we waited for the problem to happen again. And then it happened. Nice. So it was great. So as soon as it happened, we did the data fix in production to rebuild those records. And then we jumped into the logs and found, here's the log record right there. And it tells us that it's deleting almost 15,000 tax month line records on Sunday at 11 a.m. Okay, like that tells us something. So here was the culprit. The script called update invalid tax month lines. When, not quite sure when the log record said it was Sunday at 11, but I don't know what calls it. So we can see line 24 there is doing the delete. So let's talk about what calls this script. So again, did more DDR work. Nothing calls this script. But there's a script schedule that runs at Sundays at 11 a.m. So that was helpful. That told us then that when this happened, it was only going to happen on Sundays. So we could kind of like plan for it. So, Monday morning we could go in, fix the data, so they could go on about the week until we actually solve the problem. Now, if you look at line 10, we're doing a find. Then in line 11, we're omitting, we're only showing the omitted values. So I want to see, well, what found set is that producing? So the find there, I know it's a little small, is looking for records. So we're in the context of, what is our context here? Yeah, I think we're in the context of budget line dates. Heather would know. We're actually in the context of tax month line. Anyway, so we're looking for records who see a related budget line date record through a relationship, and then omitting all the records that have a record on the other side of that relationship. So here is the relationship graph, and we will see this image a number more times in this presentation. So looking at the graph, we can see a little better what's going on here. We're in the context of tax month line on the left, looking through to budget line date on the right, the one that's in red. Just a simple primary key, foreign key relationship. So why can't a parent see its children? I don't know. But I don't know, it wasn't a good enough answer.
They're emancipated.
Yeah, there you go. It didn't make sense. We're only there a time machine. So I debugged in production. Very dangerous. So instead of doing this in our staging environment, I debugged in production because I was hoping that activity had happened during the week that would have created the data scenario to produce this found set. Now, obviously, I was going to stop the debugger before I got to the delete all records. I just wanted to see like what records was it finding and what did they look like at the time. And sure enough, I got records. Got a found set of records. Now, one admission here, when I went to go grab screenshots for this presentation, it of course fixed the problem in their production system. But I had to go to our dev stack, break the code again to recreate the scenario so that I could get the screenshots of it. So you'll notice on the left here that the related record for budget line date FYCID is empty. CID, by the way, is just our naming convention for primary keys. I don't know why it is that way. It's just...
It's so that alphabetically it's at the top.
Yeah, there you go.
3 underscores, triple underscore C underscore ID.
Yeah. Now why C instead of A, like, okay, whatever. So it's currently seeing no related record through that relationship. So I wanted to see if currently I can see a record through that relationship. So here's the graph again. You'll notice that I've got the budget line date FY create table occurrence, which is joined there on a 5 predicate relationship. So I wanted to see if I just did a find in budget line date on those 5 criteria, would I find a record? And sure enough, I found records. Okay. So the records are there, but yet it can't see them through relationship, at least at the time the script was running. So ask the question, well, can I see a record right now through the relationship? I pulled up the data viewer, threw the table occurrence in there, and sure enough, I can see a record through there. And if you look at the ID that's shown over on the left, that record is over there. So I could see the record right now. And what you'll notice over on the far right here, if you look at the creation timestamp, these records were created back in 2015. So they used to work, but now all of a sudden they don't work. So somehow maybe they were modified. You'll also know that in this budget line date record on the right, that first column is the foreign key, the PAX month line. Empty. That's awfully interesting. So I hypothesized that there must be something that's clearing that field. So what clears the PAX month line? It's easy. Nothing. There's no reason why that field should ever be cleared. It should always have a value. There's no practical business reason why we would ever do that on purpose. So I thought, well, what are the various ways you could set fields in FileMaker? And it turns out that there's actually quite a few. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm actually only going to talk about one of them, which is set field, because that's the one that I first went looking for, and it turned out that that was the right direction to go. But if it had not been, if that was a dead end, then I would have come back to this list. And a number of these in this situation we could rule out, because a number of these inserts are for container fields. All right, so immediately I could write those off if I wanted to. So, focusing on set field. So I did a find in the DDR for any script step that was a set field on any table occurrence of budget line date of the D PAX month line field. I found exactly one. Okay, so it's hopeful. And here it is, line 17 of whatever script this was. But if you take a look at this, you'll notice that the set field is not clearing the field. It's setting it with a value. It's setting it with a value of PAX month line FY CID, which again is our naming convention for primary keys. In that, since it's the primary key, it's always going to have a value. If I pull up the field options on this field, you can see that this is set as an auto-enter serial value. So it should always exist, right? Like that's never not empty. So how does an auto-entered serial number not exist? That shouldn't be possible. So here's our graph again. In this context, we are looking at the middle, budget line date FY create, looking through those that 5 predicate relationship to PAX month line table. So so I thought, well, maybe one reason why it can't see the record over there is the record doesn't exist. That's possible. That would make a lot of sense. So if we look at the script again, you can see the set field on line 17. However, line 14 is also doing a set field. And what this is doing is, in the event that there's not a related record on the other side of that relationship, line 14 is setting a value through that relationship to create the record. So, and that's why this budget line date table occurrence is called budget line date FY create, because it's the one that creates these other records. So even if there wasn't a related record at the beginning of the loop, after line 14, there would definitely be a related record. But it appeared that there wasn't. So here's my hypothesis. The line 14 set field is failing somehow. And therefore, there was no record on the other side of that relationship. So when it set the field with the primary key, it was an empty value. So it unintentionally was clearing it. Now, so let's analyze that hypothesis and gather some evidence. I already had a hunch that this was happening when budgets got pushed into the system. I can't remember how we got that hunch, but fairly early on, we got that hunch. So I looked at my related budget line date records that we were just looking at in my found set, and I made a note of the user modification data over on the right. So who is the modifier and when was this modified? Of course, notice I recreated the scenario for these screenshots because this is dated January 2024. But this really happened in production, I promise, believe me. So from there, I made a note of those, and then I went to most recently pushed budget for this participant. Yeah. Sure enough, there we go. Budget pushed on that date by that user, and it was like within a 5-minute time frame. So that was that told me a lot. The user and time frame matched. Now, I happened to know that the script that we were just looking at that was doing all of that stuff runs on server. Therefore, if line 14 failed, it would show up in the event log. So I searched, I went to the event log and I searched for that user in that time frame, and I gave it like a minute window, 30 seconds before, 30 seconds after. And I searched for the string line 14 error. I found exactly one record. I was so thrilled when I got this. My hypothesis was correct. Now, that takes us to our next question. How does a set field through a create relationship fail? Because again, that shouldn't fail. So as a reminder, here's our relationship from the context of budget line date FY create in the middle, setting a field to Pax month line in red over on the left. So I had some ideas about why a create relationship might be failing. First of all, it's not a create relationship. Maybe once upon a time it was, and that checkbox got unclicked. Maybe there's a permissions issue. Maybe that user doesn't have permissions to write or edit data in that other table. Or maybe one or more of the predicate fields are empty. So let's look at those. Is it a create relationship? Yes, it is. Okay. Well, ruled out the easy one. Permissions issue, we confirmed that it was not a permissions issue. Were any of the predicates empty? Well, let's take a look at that. So these are the 5 fields in that relationship. Each of those 5 happens to be a calculation. Some of them are auto-enters, some of them are unstored. Nonetheless, they are calculations. So let's go through and look at those calcs to see could any of them ever be empty. So this first one on D, participant. There's the calc extract packs budget line. Extract packs is just a custom function. Now, this is operating from the context of budget line date. Budget line date has to have a budget line foreign key, so that's never going to be empty. Okay, because there's lots of other assumptions that I've made along the way. This shouldn't happen, yet it is. And our budget line foreign key there is a manufactured UUID that we put together that contains the participant ID inside of it. So the extract packs custom function is just pulling that ID out from this unique string. So that'll never be empty. The next one is month. Well, there's the calc. Month on field called date. Again, date is never going to be empty in this table because it's a budget line date. The record wouldn't exist if it didn't have a date. So it's not the month column. Same story with year. It's just a simple basic function on the date field. Underscore address. This calc is looking at some table occurrence called SD budget lines by, and it was a really long table occurrence. I just shortened its name. Yeah, like this isn't going to fit on the slide. It's very descriptive, but wasn't going to fit on the slide. But if we read through this, that like first is empty line accommodates the scenario where it can't see a record on the other side of the relationship. So this calc will always have a value. It will never be blank. If it thinks it's going to be blank, it puts in a hard-coded default value. Now, address master budget line. Same story. Is if the related record is trying to look at is empty, defaults to a value of -1. So this field will never be empty. So all three of my ideas about why the create relationship might be failing didn't pan out. And then I had another idea. Maybe you couldn't see the target table. So let's investigate that. What file are context in? Budget line date. Budget line date is in the ISS billing file. The target table is in a file called ISS packs FY. So I went back to log or the access log, I forget which, and I searched for that specific user in that same 1 minute time window, and for any mention of the ISS packs FY file. And I found one log entry. I was so excited. This is great. And so what this says is authentication failed on the database ISS packs FY. So I thought, great, this is a super easy fix. So here's what we did. At the top of the script, we manually opened the packs FY file, made sure that it was open. If it wasn't open, then we just exited the script. Super simple, except it didn't work. So for some reason, pass-through authentication is failing. How does pass-through authentication fail? Well, for pass-through authentication to work, the account has to exist in both files. And in our customer's case, they're using Active Directory to authenticate into their files. So the FileMaker accounts there are set up as external server accounts. The AD group name has to match the FileMaker account name in order for that authentication to work. And the user needs to be in the correct AD group. Not to mention the AD groups or the accounts in FileMaker Security need to be all sorted the same, because the first account that a user is in, the first one it comes to in the list, that's the one that authenticates the file. So let's investigate these three things. does the account that this user was using exist in both of those files? Yes, it did. Okay. The AD group name matches. So the AD group name and the FileMaker account name both match. Was the user in the correct AD group? Yes. We went back and forth with their IT department to determine this. I was kind of at a loss. And the sun set. And then the sun rose. And then the sun set again. And then serendipity happened. I was working on another ticket, I think maybe even for a different client, and I stumbled across this Veris documentation page. I've been to this page before. I've read words on this page before, but I've only read the words that I cared about on the page. There's this section in the middle that says, can access other FileMaker profiles only when both of the following are true. The files are on the same host. Yep, cool, we got that. Check that one off the list. Second, the files were already opened by the client that started the server-side script. Oh, okay. So the actual fix was before, so you can see line 50 there, the form script on server. Before the PSOS got launched, we opened the PaxFY file locally on that client. For some reason, this particular user, in the nature of their job, never needed to open up that file in the background. Other employees, as developers, by the nature of the screens that we were going to and whatnot, that file automatically got opened up in the background. Never ran into this problem. This user did. So we explicitly opened that file, and that subscript there, line 43, confirm file is open in PaxFY. All that file is an exit script step that says, quote, open. Just to confirm that we've gotten a response back from that file. So we did that, and it actually worked. That fixed the problem. And it was annoying that something that simple, I mean, what is that? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of codes. Most of that, half it's just error trapping. Like, super simple, and it's clear as day, right? In FileMaker's documentation, right? They tell you, yeah, this won't work. You have to do it this way. So I kind of want to talk through like where we've been. So we started with the budgets were all of a sudden empty for some small percentage of people for no reason. And we pulled that thread. Okay, this was empty. This was empty. This was getting cleared. But this was actually failing to set even though it should be, which was resulting in the false clearing, and on and on and on. And it turns out that it was an authentication issue that we just needed to resolve client side that was so far removed from the actual original symptom. And so kind of the FileMaker pro tip takeaway, if you wanted some practical takeaway from this, is when executing a perform script on server, the client must be authenticated into every file that the script, its subscripts, and its sub to the end scripts touches. So for an example, say file A runs script A. Script A calls a subscript, script B, file B. Script B then references an unstored calc field called field C that lives in file C. That calculation in field C references field D that lives in file D. That means that the client must be authenticated into files A, B, C, and D before launching the PSOS. Even though the client is only calling a script in file A. And scripts are only running in files A and B. Scripts or data are accessed in all 4 of those. And you will have unexpected results, some of which may be benign, some of which may be bad if you don't have all of them open. Now, this is fairly simple if your solution is one file, 5 files, something small, but it's difficult when the system is 50 files, and kind of the backstory with the paxfy file is that data and structure used to be a part of another file that we decided was getting too big. So we split that file and we split out all of the paxfy stuff away into its own file, which then created this issue. We did that several years ago, but it created the groundwork for this issue to happen because we're just assuming that password authentication is going to work, all the files are going to open, and that's fine, except when you're using PSOS. But hopefully you've gotten a little bit more from this presentation. A little, some ideas of how to kind of methodically and bang your head against the wall and pull those threads. So I want to go through a few kind of things in the thread pulling toolkit, TM. DDRs. DDRs are invaluable here. So FileMaker can export either as XML or HTML. If it's small enough, if your system's small enough, maybe the HTML is fine. But I've killed browsers before trying to do that in the HTML. So with the XML, you can use FM Perception. I know that's kind of a standard tool. You can build your own. So for a lot of the DDR work I did, I was using an internal tool that we built that takes the XML, uses an XSLT file to translate the XML and map those into records, and then imports them into a FileMaker file as records. So we've got a table called scripts, a table called script steps, a table called layouts, a table called relationships, and so on and so forth. And then I can go in and do all of the powerful FileMaker stuff of finds and searching quasi-regex type stuff. Or if I want to search for a specific string, I want to search for function missing. That's very helpful for that. Next is logs. Logs were very helpful. So use the standard built-in logs, so event log, access log, top call stats, etc. Custom logs like the ones we added into the script where we were writing to our own log table. Use logging tools. So actually the screenshots I showed of those log records are from a tool we use called Graylog, which is a log aggregator. So we've got it set up for this client, and it's connected to a number of their servers that constantly is downloading top call stats, access log, event log, and other things, aggregates them all into one place, doesn't get full and then discarded like a normal log file, and then we can just search it real easily. And then be surgical with your logs. Sometimes it's difficult to know what should I be logging, and in the example earlier here, we knew there was a specific thing that we wanted to log and see, is this causing it? So we just threw a script in. Next is, I'm going to say, creativity. So brainstorm with others. So we actually, when I was talking through the different ways you can delete records, we did that as an internal brain trust at Harmonic that said, hey, this is happening. Shouldn't be possible, but it is. Let's brainstorm of the ways records could be being deleted. And we talked through, pros and cons of each, and to kind of get us started in a direction. And the outcome of that meeting was we said, hey, Alex, go add some logging into these 4 scripts to see which one of them might be the problem. Secondly, though, is understanding your data. I think that is super, super important. Because if you don't understand your data, it's not apparent to you when something doesn't look quite right. If a timestamp doesn't make sense, if a missing key doesn't make sense, or there's a certain pattern in the data, that there's no way to pull that thread if you don't know what you're looking for, or if you don't know what you're looking at and how that should relate to other things. Lastly, I'm going to say curiosity. So embrace the and the huh. And what I mean by that is when you're going through and something doesn't quite look right, or there was that extract packs custom function that we saw. Like, I don't know what that does. That looks interesting. Well, go look at that custom function. Go look at the field that it's running against. Kind of pull that thread to better understand your environment, your data, what it means, what the code is doing. Because with that, I think, or paired with that, is don't gloss over the details. Because it may be those little details that you may just want to brush aside. Oh, that's insignificant. Well, if you're trying to figure out how something is happening, should be impossible. You can't overlook those details because it's not going to be something super obvious. It's especially if it's something that used to work and has all of a sudden stopped working. It's going to be something small somewhere. As long as that's not oh yeah, well that external server was turned off, so that's why. No.
But you got to dig through the big stuff until you find the small stuff.
Yep, exactly. And then lastly, embrace serendipity. I wish I could say that I solved this problem by my sheer brilliance, but I'm a little frustrated at the fact that serendipity gave me the answer rather than me going, oh, well, I'm a FileMaker certified, blah, 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 and I know that it's this. I now know that it's that. But when you're trying to rack your brain of all the FileMaker knowledge that you have and what this could possibly be, and there's so many layers, especially in a complex system that's got multiple files, lots of ESS data sources, you're interacting with web code on multiple different servers. It's this really complex thing. Like, embrace serendipity. I don't know how to do that other than, I think putting it down for a while. I made a certain amount of progress on pulling this thread and then, set it down for a week or two. I was like, well, I'll see if I think of anything in the shower and, what great ideas.
Is that billable time?
So sadly, shower time is not billable. Harmonic is still trying to figure out how we can bill for that. It doesn't look great on an invoice. So
it's more productive than staring at a screen.
It is. But luckily, the customer did pay for the time when I solved this problem because I was working on a ticket for them. So it's a different ticket, but for them nonetheless. And thank you. That's all I've got.
Doesn't it seem like the script engine and FileMaker should yell at you if you're trying to access something that you don't have authentication to?
Well, put it in a log. Is that not good enough?
I think that if it were a user running it, well, first of all, the pass-through authentication would have worked. But if you can't access the file, a user would get a message to log into the file. And
the machine does.
There is no, it's a headless, windowless environment, so that doesn't happen.
See, like one of the nice things about if you're doing something in PHP or some other kind of back-end web code is if any of those types of things happen, you just get a 500 error and the code just quits.
Right.
It goes, I can't see this database, I can connect to it, this value isn't what I was expecting, it just quits. FileMaker, on the other hand, goes, that's not there, I'll keep going.
That's right.
No, please don't keep going if the thing's not there. But yeah, I think, Claris, if you're listening, having some kind of in the background validation that happens, particularly for perform script on server, that is able to read the whole call stack that is about to get called, look at everything that call stack touches, and either open those files, automatically for the user, or at least prompt and say, hey, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work because something. Rather than us having to stub our toes, find it out.
With the new transactions mechanism, issues have been prevented. I mean, it will not execute the code if that authentication didn't happen.
Maybe, huh?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know if it would have solved this particular or prevented this particular scenario, just because this is legacy code.
Yeah, but if you had implemented this the same code using transactions, it may have been prevented.
Yeah.
It's like a network error or something that may cause automatic revert.
Yeah. So having that set field to fail, just say, okay, just revert everything that I've done. And then we still would have had to figure out why is the set field failing, but we wouldn't have destroyed data along the way to discovering that. Thankfully, the data that was destroyed was just summary records. Right? So we just went back to their children and grandchildren records and just rebuilt them. So, it wasn't source data that we lost, but still frustrating nonetheless.
Let's say that was a fun exercise. I was trying really hard to figure it out before the end. I was really hoping it was the user, but
yeah.
the one thing I wanted to add too, if you don't work with the DDR and stuff like that, you can select all of your scripts, save as a PDF, and then you can search with Command F through that. If you're looking for something like set field, nice little troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Is that what FM Perception does? You said it turns it into FileMaker tables? All your scripts?
No, yeah, our internal tool does. So it just uses the FileMaker import record script step, and you choose the source file, the XML, and when you choose an XML file, the import record script step gives you the option to choose an XSLT file to just interpret or translate that XML into records and stuff you want. And then its XML engine is able to read all that and parse it in and load it up. So it's
the way to do it with the PDFs.
Yeah, which works
Which
works if you're confident that everything's just going to be in your script.
Yeah, but if you're looking at the lines of code,
and only one file at a time.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
You can also do the same thing. You can print your fields as well. Yeah, and then
DDR.
search them.
They really need that.
That'd be great. How about if you could sort things like custom?
Yeah.
Wait. No. Anyway, I have one more.
New version.
In hindsight, it looks like something that could have been pre-tested. So it could have been wrapped in an if test. If I can see this, or if I can't see this, don't, exit or whatever. But it's the kind of scenario where why would we ever expect that this always ever present source of God's information wouldn't be there? So it's not a natural thing for us as developers to prevent something that's so expected.
Right, should I error trap for set field
Every time.
and new record and
everything.
Yes, I'm error trapping for after fines for found counts and things like that. But new record, I shouldn't have to error trap for that. Set field, I shouldn't have to error trap for that, right? Sometimes I think part of the reason why we didn't trap for that in the first place was the time that script was written, the tax month line table was in the same file as the budget. Right? And it was only later that we did that file separation and now put them in two different files.
Who's the guy that did that?
It wasn't me. I think he no longer works for us, actually. So there you go.
You're just being nice.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything?
How long did the whole process take you? Do you want to admit?
A few months. But it was kind of it wasn't a few months of 40 hours every week. It was, I think it was maybe June or July when the problem first came up. And it was maybe November or so by the time I actually got it solved. Once we figured out that it was only happening on Sundays and we knew how to rebuild the data and fix it, kind of had a good enough Band-Aid that for several weeks until we could prioritize getting around to it, we just, let's just fix the data until we can actually prevent the thing. And then it was, I don't know, a good bit of the findings in this presentation were, there was one day, I don't know if I can't remember why, maybe it was like bad weather or something, but I was working from home instead of going into the office. So I sat down and just for like 4 hours, pulled this thread and got a lot of the big breakthroughs. And so it really just took like focused downtime. And then, so I recorded a video where I just like brain dumped everything that I had just figured out, and then came back to it, I don't know, 6, 7 weeks later. Then, okay, what's this? Let's pick up the thread again and pull that a little bit more.
That's a really good idea. Like, I take notes, like, I write notes all the time. Problem is that then I can't find the note. Right? So I like
When you find them, you can't read them.
And when you do the voice to talk into your phone to record something, I get frustrated because it misspells things, and then I have so it's too distracting to do that. But a recording, a video is a great idea.
Yeah, I use Loom. There's a number of us at Harmonica use Loom. I love it. It's great. So just did a screen recording. Did screen capture and my face and my voice. I was also wearing a backwards cap at the time. I don't know if that maybe contributed to the success. I don't know. A backwards cap and joggers sitting at my dining room table, just going at it. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
That was great. Thanks.
Thank you.